Welcome to the only brother-sister podcast built for teachers, by teachers, Dumplings Over Flowers.
I'm the sister, Nicole.
And I'm the brother, Izzy.
And this podcast is here to take you on a backstage tour of our combined 50 years of experience teaching so that we can help you recognize and celebrate substance over appearance.
Or dumplings over flowers. Yeah. Well, Waterman, spin the wheel. Well, hello.
Hey, hello from New York.
And hello from Dallas.
Hey.
We are in a new, this is a new setting for us.
It is. We're remote. We're coming to you from separate locations, which is not something we've done before for a podcast, though certainly we've sat here in these seats and worked on Zoom together for the last 3 years. And we've done webinars this way, but first time for the podcast. So let's go.
So here we are. Yeah, let's get it going.
I'm by myself, but you have a key member of the team with you.
I sure do. My attaché is with us, Mr. Waterman. So let's get to it. Waterman, what's the topic for today?
The pigeon or the statue?
The pigeon or the statue? Okay. Huh.
All right. That's a pretty famous Izzy-ism.
True.
Or should we just say an ism? Get it? An Izzy-ism?
Yeah.
That's a pretty famous Izzy-ism.
Yeah.
And it's a good one.
Well, we were using it a lot when setting up classroom environment, or more particularly with adult learning and our professional development, and it became one of our norms, just to kind of come to that place of understanding that sometimes you're the pigeon and sometimes you're the statue, and if you kind of let that sink in and realize what the meaning is, that was us letting you sink in. I was giving a dramatic pause. So some days, things break your way.
I was going to interpret your meaning. Don't. I was going to use the pause.
So what did you think of it?
I think some days you get pooped on and some days you poop on others.
Yeah, that's a little bit of too literal of an analogy there.
Yes. I let it sink in.
And unfortunately, I think that's something, I don't know about the poop on part, but some days, you get to play from ahead and some days you kind of playing from behind. And in teacher world, that could very much look like a variety of things. And since our focus is primarily towards, working with teacher lesson planning and preparation, it's kind of like that moment where, the best plans just kind of fall apart, or you feel like you've prepared something so great and so well and it just didn't happen the way you expected, and a variety of other things.
I really like when you say that actually in a workshop with adults or in a class with kids, I guess, but I've only heard it in a workshop with other adult learners where you talk about that in the context of working from the ideal.
Right.
I think that's something really cool that you set up right in the beginning of all of our workshops. We really try to make it clear that we should not stop ourselves in the process of adult learning or any kind of learning, especially in a workshop setting. We shouldn't stop ourselves from any new idea, trying any new strategy, picturing ourselves in that place where this will work, just because we might think about, this is not going to work with my kids. Well,
right.
You haven't seen my third period class, work from the ideal, right? So to me, it's like always be the statue. Try to be the statue.
Absolutely. And I think that speaks to the ability, let's call it, to take risks, to, I used the word ability on purpose because it's kind of a skill that gets developed over time as you develop other skills like confidence and either self-confidence or just coming to a complete understanding that sometimes things are just not going to work.
Right.
And but you start with the ideal. Here's what it's supposed to look like. Here's what it's supposed to sound like. Here's what it's supposed to feel like. Here's the intentional outcome. And now I have something to at least evaluate my choices over, or to even provide myself some feedback, or pull in some others, and ask for their feedback, and including the kids and including the students that you're working with. That you can kind of say, okay, were we the pigeon or the statue today? Did this thing work, or did it kind of go in the wrong direction?
That's really cool. And it's I can't imagine you're not going to get poop jokes if you do that.
Well,
I
of
mean,
course,
so there's that.
yeah,
But work with it.
yeah.
I'd say work with it.
Yeah, well, we don't have to only use that analogy and that idea, but for our audience, we're sure gonna. So, what's your best poop joke? I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
Let's,
I was
let's
I
not.
was about to shine
Yeah,
here.
well, you have a 7-year-old son, so I'm sure that you got jokes
We're at
aplenty.
peak poop time. There aren't
Yeah.
really jokes. It's just replacing words. It's like the Smurf
Sure.
effect. Like I smurfed this, and
Yeah,
let's
well,
do
you're
the
dating
Smurf
yourself
in the
for
Smurf.
sure.
I
Yeah.
don't know. There was a reboot. It could be the 90s, early 2000s.
True. Okay, still
But
dating.
everything is just every song lyric, everything. You know how it goes.
Yeah. Oh, I do. So, all right, let's take this into an instructional context, and
Yeah.
and really into that risk taking idea in terms of in the classroom for students, and where that all begins. Let's say.
Yeah. How do you
So
create a safe space for that to take place? How do you
right.
create the courtyard where both of those things exist?
If you're asking, I would say
I'm
that
asking.
that the start of that is the vulnerability of being a high quality teacher and a high impact teacher. It takes that vulnerability, that empathy, but the
Yeah.
vulnerability piece is to say, hey, maybe it's the scenario I mentioned already, which is like a new strategy, or an idea that you had, that you're willing to take the risk, but you include the students in that risk. And that's a tough place to be, because my image of teacher was the person that was always in control, always had it together. I felt like that was my role as a young teacher. And as I got older, I realized that relinquishing that control is not losing the student; it's actually bringing them in.
It's
And
empowering.
yeah, big time. And the more I kind of let them know that, hey, I'm trying something new here. I hope it doesn't go to poop, but there's a chance it might.
Pigeon poop.
So yeah, so there's there's that give and take, and we let them in on the process. I think that's the first place where we can build their risk taking, is to show them ours. And I think that's a real important step in the process.
I think I would either add to or just ask you what you think about the idea of taking that risk. Again, we've said this before on a previous episode too, that when it comes to trying new things, you kind of
Right.
shouldn't try a new strategy at the same time you're trying out new
new
content, etc. So I think maybe in this case, I'd say this relates more to trying strategies than introducing new content, because we're not going to say,
Yeah.
hey, guys, you don't know about the Civil War yet, so I'm going to take a risk and tell you all about it.
Right. Well, we might. So really, it's more about entering the kids into the content, and when that happens, it gives them voice. I think that what I'm kind of thinking about from the student perspective, because from the teacher perspective, you're right. It's something that you can break down some of those walls by just showing that you're vulnerable and that you're willing to take a risk,
Right.
and kind of model that. But on a daily basis, I think that to me goes towards like that content entry piece, and just involving the students in the conversation more, so that they can ask better questions, take the risks that are necessary for them to develop and internalize their own meaning, and start asking and responding maybe to peers in a much more let's call it intelligent way, and a kind of a a way to dig
Maybe
down into
I'm going to say maybe thoughtful or
yeah.
considered way,
Okay.
right? Like
Sure.
maybe not
Yes.
intelligent way,
Well, I think all those
but
things
maybe.
kind of equal that. Well,
Sure.
in terms of building up your intelligence, if you will, or
Hmm.
deepening your understanding, you're going to have to ask deeper questions, more questions, and when students are asking questions of each other, that's a real vulnerable place. That's a real risk taking place, and I think to kind of foster that opportunity and create some space for that on a daily basis in an intentional level is a place to really kind of build those skills in students.
I would agree, obviously, because I always agree with you.
Yeah, I was going to say not so obvious, but okay.
I would agree. I also really love the idea of embodying the loser sometimes and
Okay.
embodying the winner sometimes. So one
How
of
does
the
that? What does that
things
look like?
that looks like being the pigeon or being the statue, right? But
Right,
in a
but in real
practical
time, what does that
way.
look like?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I learned from Lauren Esposito, my colleague and friend from way back,
Okay.
she does a lot of work with improv and the way that
Mm.
improv can empower teachers specifically to teach writing. So
Okay.
one of her exercises that she does is the most famous improv phrase that you can ever say, which is yes and. The
Mm.
only rule of improv is that you're agreeable and that you don't shut down whatever they're trying to do in the scene. Instead, you go, yes. And so if you say, oh my gosh, somebody just came in the bank to rob it, I don't go, well, we're in a supermarket. So how do you know that? I say,
Right.
yes. And he's got a gun,
Yeah.
and you build the scene that way, right? So one of the ways that she showed me how to teach argument was yes and. So
Hmm.
we give kids a place to embody those two roles. And in
Mhm.
that case, it's like two stances of an argument.
Mhm.
So one of the exercises
Mhm.
would be,
Mhm. What do
whoa,
we need that? No, sorry. It's just there doesn't seem in our students' world right now, a little commercial break. There doesn't seem to be two stances on anything. Or if they are, they're just so polar opposite that it's an actual fight versus a
right.
reasoned argument. So
Well, that's the
sorry, go
thing.
on.
I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
yeah, it's unprecedented, just unfounded. It doesn't matter. It's just opinion flinging and then
Right.
shutting down, right? So
Right.
so I think if we can think about the one of the practical ways that I thought of when you said, how can we create a learning environment that allows kids to feel what it's like to be the pigeon and the statue or adults,
Right.
I thought of
Right.
that yes and activity pretty instantly
Mhm.
because the idea and the thing that I've seen her do with students and with teachers is to say, okay, let's do a low stakes. Again, nothing high stakes with a new strategy, right? Let's do a
Mhm.
low stakes position on you're writing a letter to the principal and you're trying to convince the principal that we should have school all year
Mhm.
or we should just have school, on our normal schedule. So
Right.
they pick a stance and they brainstorm using that yes and. So if your stance right now, what would you vote for if I asked you if you wanted school year round but shorter days, let's say?
Yes, yeah, more high quality use of time. So
You'd
maybe
want a year round
a
school?
4-day week for year round. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So, Izzy, why is that a good idea?
Well, I think that it maximizes the amount of time we can spend doing quality work, and it minimizes the amount of gaps that we have in taking breaks and not really keeping the coherence of year to year to going.
So, if we were bearing this out and brainstorming, I would say yes. And,
Yep.
teachers won't be so burned out because, they have more evenly spaced workloads.
Sure.
And
3-day weekend every week.
you would say,
Yes, and
mm-hmm, and all those
they
great reasons,
also
right?
will
So,
enjoy the holidays
after,
still because they won't lose them. Sorry, go on.
yes, and I guess,
Yes, and
but
they'll get paid a little more because they'll have more contact time with students.
yes, and the consistency will lead to better performance, right?
Yes, and
Now,
oh, sorry.
if we carry out the rest of this, It's now we're going to embody the other side. So, dear Principal Mazzola, we should keep the regular school year the way it is because I'll start our brainstorm because teachers really value that family time where they can take long vacations in the summer.
Yes, and it really helps with work-life balance, not just for vacations and families, but also, in that summertime when it's a little more me time.
Yes, and that's what we're used to. And change is really hard.
Yes, and a lot of teachers work, kind of a secondary job in the summers and do coaching and camps, and they would have to really alter
Yes.
those schedules, and maybe they were making some big impact during those times.
Yes.
I like
And
this.
maybe they're helping other kids, right? Yeah, it's a really great method. Lauren's a genius.
Love it.
And yes, Lauren's a genius. And
And
I hope
we
she's
should have her
listening.
on the
Lauren, I love you.
we should have her on the podcast soon.
We should. We
Well,
really
anybody
should. But
that
this
we
is what I
randomly
think
reference,
of.
I think, should come on. But go on.
Oh, okay. So far we got Lauren and we got Principal
You said
Mazzola.
Mazzola. Yeah, those are real people.
But this is what I think of when I think about embodying or really trying out being both sides of anything. It's how do you do that in a genuine way? Like really be invested. You wanted year-round school, but you just brainstormed with me great reasons. I don't know how many, 3 or 4 great reasons that we should keep school days the way that they are. You
Right.
really embodied that other stance, right? So Peter Elbow, who is a fantastic writing teacher, researcher. Everybody should read his book.
Waterman book
Plural.
elbow.
Oy,
For
that would be a get. That
keep
would be a
name
get.
dropping, and we keep having to add to our list. But go on.
But he famously calls that the doubting game and the believing game. That when we are, reading an argument or thinking about how to craft an argument, we really have to play that
Right.
believing game and we have to play the doubting game. We have to do both. And as you alluded to, especially now in our society and climate and atmosphere, I guess, politically
just
charged,
there you go.
atmosphere that permeates every
Polarized.
area of life and sometimes starts at school or starts at a board meeting or starts at wherever. We need to be teaching those skills more and more to be the pigeon and the statue, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're one or the other, but you need to understand the perspective and viewpoints of both.
Yep. Love that. Love that. So one of the things that, and I alluded to the idea of entry and entry into the content, because I do see, actually help me make sure that I'm on the right track here, because I like your direction in terms of kind of embodying both sides of something.
I think it's just really, I think
ahead.
it's really, I want to say like humane. I think it's really just a good thing to do.
Well, yeah, but
If possible.
instructionally now, if we're going to drill down into like instructional behaviors, instructional practice, which is really the dumpling over the flower, how do we kind of translate this into an everyday approach to giving kids voice? And that's where I see that both sides come in, because if you can create a not a low stakes, even just if you can create a learning environment or an atmosphere where communal and the conversational discourse and the way that students are asking and talking to each other on a daily basis is already established, then as you introduce topics that might be a little more charged, you can still have a foundation by which they can have a voice and listen to the opinion and voices of others that might even be different from theirs. But see, right now, what you don't realize is that to me always sounds very, very social emotional driven, very humanities driven, very English driven. You talked about argumentative, but I'm going to mathify this thing right now and say that even in our STEM and STEAM classes, or a math class, there's a way to give voice to both sides of a topic. And that is one of the most important pieces, because if we really want to drill down and talk about like student gain, student achievement, when you have somebody consider similarities and differences, you're having them really, there's a 40% increase on standardized testing, because that's how
According,
standardized tests are measuring mastery. And this, according to Robert Marzano, another guest coming up on our podcast in a few weeks, once we figure out how to finally actually speak to him and then book him and talk to him. And I was just kidding about a couple of weeks. We'll see. But to really
anyway,
to really understand similarities and differences around a topic is a critically important, high function, high caliber functional skill for students, particularly in math, because
yeah,
you're talking about being able to kind of know what is and what isn't. And we think about vocabulary now, and we talk about like a Freyer model, an example, a non-example, right?
right.
So every day when we talk about content entry, we at Mosaic Instructional Planning work with using multiple entry points by which students can access the content conversation. And I feel like it fits exactly into this conversation here today.
Yeah, I feel like that too.
Yeah, and really kind of helps students to one, find their voice, gives teachers an opportunity to make sure that they're considering every student in the room and giving an opportunity for them to have a voice in the conversation. And then three, allowing for the peer-to-peer interactions that would take place that would represent that vulnerability, that discussion, those techniques to really kind of flesh out something and not just take on one position or think you're right all the time and all that stuff, sort of stuff. So,
Yeah,
kind of
I
expound on that in your world.
definitely, I agree. And I think that you're right to say that it has a definite place in our entry point into content conversations. I think that we need to go into multiple entry point lesson starters in a whole other podcast. But for
Yeah.
now,
No, this
but
is
for
it's
now,
just a good precursor. Sure.
if you'd like to learn more about multiple entry point lesson starters, as well as ways you can design really carefully considered construction of your lessons, you could visit us at mosaicip.com and check out Mosaic Instructional Planning, a lesson planning platform that will give you the support, resources, and training you need to design your best lesson to have your best day.
There you
Also,
go.
for now, I know. Also,
That's
for
good.
now, I do think that something that we could take away and kind of practice, instantly. I really encourage everybody, whatever class you're in, to try the yes and activity. So I'm thinking about, Izzy, when I hear you coach math teachers and you tell them to give kids as an entry point, a list of, possible answer or like give the answer and let them find the possible questions that could
Sure.
be asked to get to this answer. I think about that. I think about the
Jeopardy approach, right?
the Jeopardy approach. I think about when you tell teachers to make sure that they're pointing out the common incorrect
Misconceptions.
ways to solve something. Yeah, like the wrong, the common pitfalls on the way to
Sure.
solving a problem. So I think that those can all be yes and conversations. If not in practice, then definitely in theory,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
but I think it's also
anything that
important.
represents a structure. Sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. It's important to bring in the viewpoint then of the pigeon and the statue.
Yeah.
Right.
And absolutely. And the fact that there's not only one way to get to a solution or to
Right.
the determination of an opinion. Or a more well-informed opinion is going to have multiple pathways and a better understanding of a solution that doesn't just exist in one space but exists in all spaces, is to have multiple solution pathways. So that's kind of the next phase of that. But really you can kind of keep it in that space where you start by looking at the yes and. It's almost like an if-then statement, or even the sense of a way to categorize a proof of something. You're developing the concept. So any kind of concept development
I love
is
proofs.
gonna work through that filter. Yes, and then and if there's a place where it doesn't feel right, or there was a curve in the road that didn't take, you became the statue, let's say, and in our scenario, then you can get correction. You can always get kind of cleaned off and get back up.
I love that. I also love this. So what do you think about T-shirts? And one side is a pigeon and one side is a statue.
Huh.
I think we need pigeon and statue gear, a bag, something.
Okay.
Or like a reversible shirt. You could say, today I feel like a pigeon. Today I feel like a statue. Hats.
Sure. I mean, go crazy. Let's get Waterman on it.
Go crazy. Okay.
You get the shirt. I like the shirt, front and back idea.
What would be on the front? The pigeon or the statue?
The pigeon.
Really?
The pigeon.
I'd want the statue on the front. I'd want the statue on the front. Okay. So maybe you could pick. You could pick which one you want on the front.
That's right. And then at our next workshops, you can wear the pigeon on the front, or the statue, and I'll wear the pigeon.
Hi,
All
Thor.
right. Yeah. So that's another fun part about being at home, huh? So in closing, let's kind of put a bow on this thing. The pigeon and the statue is a concept that we use when we're talking about norming our workshops, but we also then extend that into the vulnerability conversation with students, the modeling of that vulnerability as a teacher when I'm working with strategies, or I'm trying a new thought or a new thing with students. I'm going to kind of let them in on the process, let them know that, hey, this might turn out, exactly as I expected. It might not, but that's learning, and we're all learning. I'm learning how to do this better as a teacher. I'm learning how to serve you guys better. I'm learning how to create better and different experiences. And likewise, I'm expecting from my students, you, the viewers in this case, or you, the hypothetical kids that I'm looking at right now, and I'm thinking about providing
you
those
pigeons to.
Yes, I'm creating those opportunities for you also to kind of live in that state of vulnerability and ask the kind of questions that are going to lead to deeper understandings. And then I'm going to use my yes and to kind of build both sides of an argument, or really kind of, I would like to say it like this: surround a concept. Whether it's vocabulary, or whether it's a concept in math, or it's a concept that, in sciences, or any which way, and any content, surround that concept with the kind of the two directions at least of here's one, misconception, here's what the expectation is, and so on. And so then most of the time in that case and in that scenario, you find yourself to be on top and not working from behind. And it's a great life lesson for the kids while they develop their understanding of the content.
Well, that sounds like a really nice bow to me. I feel like on our remote version of our podcast, we're very serious.
Sure. I don't know.
We're very focused.
Very
I like it. No, I just feel very focused.
We're 28 minutes in, and you had at least a reference to poop joke a few times. So
that's true.
I don't know
that
about that's not a high percentage of
Ooh,
focus.
it's still us. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Well, until next time.
All right.
Remember, always choose
dumplings
over flowers.